Welcome back everyone, Dr. Ahmed Al-Hasni here. In my last video about the BOREA COBRA, I unboxed it and went over all the components and set it up. Now in this video, let's go into a deep dive into its features and how it compares to other shade matching devices on the market. In particular, the Vita Easy Shade, which has been the industry standard since basically forever. 2012 to be precise is when it was first launched. So first let's start with what makes the COBRA unique. First, it's this high-res OLED touchscreen on the front of it, unlike any other shade matching device. This actually shows you a live preview of exactly where you're positioning the device on the tooth when you're taking a shade detection. And this has a huge advantage over, for example, the Vita Easy Shade, which has the screen on the bottom and requires you to flip it over to see the readings. Another major difference of the COBRA is how it captures shade data. Now, I've used a few shade matching devices, and many of them take individual point measurements. The COBRA, on the other hand, captures the entire tooth surface in one shot. So let me demonstrate this for you on my own teeth, and you'll see how it instantly gives you a complete gradient map of the tooth. So let's start. We have the software here. We're just going to log in, and then what you need to do is create a new patient. So I'm going to do that just quickly. IDD test. Patient already exists. I've already done it before. Funny that. Now we're going to put it as 10th of April 1993, which is my birthday. So the software does require you to have a name, first name and last name, and date of birth. Once you create that, this looks like basically every other intraoral scanner software. You know, you've got all the teeth numbers and etc. And why it gives you this is because as you take the individual shade matching on each tooth, you can assign it a tooth number. This is very useful for record keeping. So once you're on the screen, we are all good. You can see at the top it says the COBRA is connected and synchronized. If you saw my last video unboxing the COBRA, you will know it comes with a Wi-Fi dongle. This is very important to plug in. And then you can just get going. Now the COBRA says on the screen, press to unlock. So I'm going to press and hold, and now we're ready to take a shade. Now what's really interesting is that you don't really need to do anything else on the software. As soon as you click the single button, what you're going to see is a window appear on the software. And now this is ready to take a shade detection. And what's really interesting is, again, you can see this live view of what it's seeing and also the same live view on your computer. So let me just take a quick shade detection of my 1-1. You put into position. And you press the button. Now while you're pressing, it comes up with this little don't shake the scanner icon. And why is because it takes a few seconds when you click it, just a couple, it's not really that hard to do. But if you do shake it or your hand is not stable, it will tell you to repeat the scan. Now what you can see here is automatically it's got my tooth because I've taken this shade detection, and it creates an outline of this tooth. Pretty good. I mean, with all these margin tools across any different software, it is slightly off, and you can correct this on the right hand side if you want to do a manual outline, but I'm pretty happy with that. Up here I can tell it it's the tooth number 1-1, and all of that's complete. Now on this bar on the left, you can see all the various different types of options. Again, we only just did a single click, and it's taken all these different measurements and it gives us all these different options. You got stratification, translucency, luminosity and contrast, measurement. You can measure the incisors on the software. And you also have this LAB, which is it's quite complicated. It's just a way to measure color. It's a color space that people in this industry use. But you can see how it instantly gives us a complete gradient of the tooth. Now let me just show you this. If I click stratification, you have all these different options. Just a single shade, an average shade for the whole tooth. Here it says B1, that is very flattering, thank you COBRA. And here we have C1, B1, B1, D2, C1, B2, and you've got the stratification. Now this is really what's interesting, and it kind of reminds me of dent school or master ceramics technicians where they're drawing the different shades on the teeth. And all of this can be exported easily and shared with your lab. Now to get the same information is borderline impossible with a lot of devices, And for those single shoot devices, which most shade detection devices are, you would need to take multiple measurements. Just simply to get this, you would need to take at least 3 measurements from the cervical to the incisor ledge. Whereas with the Cobra, it is just one button, one picture, and you have all of this right here. And again, you got the translucency, which is quite cool. Luminosity and contrast, you can play around with that. And as I mentioned, you can take a measurement. So in reality, it's the software where the Cobra really shines. And for the Cobra, this is called vision. Now, for most shade matching devices, including shade matching and intraoral scanners, what they give you is just a basic reading. And as you can see here, you get so many different options with the Cobra. And I think that's what really impressed me the most. Plus, you can convert from different shade systems, not just Vita. For example, if you buy the Vita Easy Shade, it only uses Vita shade guides. Whereas here, if I just go back to the stratification, here you can open shade guides and you can see a huge range of different shade guide options, whether it's Vita, Ivoclar, Vita Classic, Vita Blocks even, if you want to pick specific restorative CAD blocks, and Neurotake. This is quite advantageous for the Cobra compared to other shade matching devices, which have limited shade guide options. And as I mentioned, the software can also advise you which exact CAD/CAM material block to use. And that's quite interesting thanks to the use of the Vita Blocks 3D Master Shade Guide. And in the case of composite restorations, you can customize the shade guide by removing any unavailable shades that you may not have in the clinic. It's all quite well thought out. And the system then recalculates the closest shade. Thus, it allows you as the clinician to choose the right shade of composite according to whatever you have in your practice in stock. I mean, basically, given how easy and quick it is to take a shade with this and how much information it gives me, I found myself, open to using this in day-to-day workflows. It's not a hassle. The issue I had with a lot of other shade matching devices is that there was some friction. I would either have to calibrate it before doing so, or for example, have to take multiple shades, and I just couldn't be bothered. But this is really a one-click solution. It's quite impressive. Another cool thing is that, do you see these gray borders on the scanning tip? And you can actually see them when you do the live view. There's these gray borders on the side. And what the Cobra uses this is for automatic calibration during each capture. So as I mentioned, other devices may need separate calibration steps, but the Cobra does it automatically every time you take a measurement. But to me, seriously, what impressed me the most about the Cobra is just, again, how simple it is to use and how many different measurement modes you get from a single click. And you can even use this thing for stump shade readings for preparation color. The software additionally can create and store patient files, and all of this can be shared with the lab. Compare this to some older devices where you might need to manually record the readings or use separate apps to have these stored somewhere. With the Cobra, everything is integrated into one smooth workflow. Another decent advantage is connectivity. So this device obviously works via Wi-Fi dongle, which means no cables, and the BOREA Connect platform lets you easily share all the detailed shade information with your lab. You can send them the photos, the shade maps, and even any specific notes, all through one platform. So this device, in my eyes, complements intraoral scanners, not really competing with them. All the files on the Cobra and the BOREA software are open. They can be exported in a zip file and attached to the scanner software to send to your lab. What's also quite cool is there is a Vision Lite software to simplify communication with the lab that they can use. And this is automatically opened if they open the native .rpk file that is exported from the Cobra software. Now, in terms of accuracy, I've tested this against multiple shade guides and other devices. The Cobra consistently gets it right. I've been impressed. In fact, if you haven't read my review already, you should, because I share a bunch of different cases that I've done using the Cobra. Overall, it is just a really cool device. I think this is the future of shade matching. We need to see devices that are efficient to use and have a level of software integration like the Cobra, where things are easy to send to the lab and integrate with our intraoral scanners, etc. And to be honest, this device does well even with tricky shades, like its ability to accurately read porcelain restorations. Now let's talk about some practical considerations. So battery life is very good overall. They say over 3 hours of continuous use. I never use it that long in one go, so I don't really think you will either because it's quite quick to take a shade. So as long as it's in its charging base and plugged in, you'll see the blue LED, it is always charging. Now the device itself costs €2,900 or USD. This makes the Cobra the most expensive shade matching unit on the market, which is quite interesting. Now considering this technology and the features you're getting, particularly the full tooth gradient mapping and comprehensive software, I can see why they've positioned it as a premium device. It will be interesting to see how the market responds to this and if people will rush to buy this because, it is facing quite a lot of competition. A lot of intraoral scanner companies do put shade matching in their scanners, but it has to be said, it is nowhere close to this level of detail. The other thing you need to think about is the sterilizable tips. So these can be autoclaved up to 100 times, and they're actually quite affordable at around 11 USD per tip. I expected worse. So what this means is about 11 cents per patient when you do the maths. Now for those of you who are wondering, who is this for? What do people use this for? Well, if you're doing a lot of aesthetic cases, crown and bridge work, veneers, etc., this is undoubtedly useful. Or if you simply want to standardize communication with your lab without, all that back and forth about shades, etc. that can happen. It's very clear cut, it's very objective. This device takes out a lot of the guesswork from shade matching. And the detailed gradient maps and the accurate readings can potentially reduce remakes and improve patient satisfaction. Granted, you have to use it properly. Now overall, it just seems a lot more reliable than taking shades with our own eyes. I'm sure many of us can relate to how difficult it can be sometimes to take a shade, and having an objective tool helps us a lot because there's nothing more frustrating than getting lab work back and the shade not being right and having to redo lab work. Not only helping us, but a device like this seems very high tech and patients are impressed by this. I've had a lot of patients respond very positively when I showed them a detection of their teeth. Now compare that to taking a manual shade and in the worst case scenario getting it wrong. It's always an awkward scenario. The other thing I find the BOREA COBRA useful in is in the case of bleaching or whitening treatments. Now we all know how subjective these whitening treatments can be, especially if the patient doesn't quite get the result they're looking for. Well, with before and after shade detection using the BOREA COBRA, you can actually generate a report. And this makes patient communication, I feel, a lot better. It even has a slider tool to show a before and after on the same tooth. So that is basically everything about the BOREA COBRA. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about specific features or comparisons to other shade matching devices you're curious about. I'd be happy to help out. And again, to read a full review, it is a big one and it has a lot of images and cases, go to instituteofdigitaldentistry.com. See you in the next video.